injustice.
Yes.
Do you still see injustice now on the African continent?
Very much so. I think I'm even acutely aware of it. It's everywhere. One diaspora was visiting with me in Zimbabwe, and he was at a gas station, and there was this white woman smoking at the gas station. So he walked over to her, and he was from Zimbabwe, and he, you know, how we are greeting our elders, and he says in Shona, "Ma'am, how are you?" He's saying it in Shona. And the woman says, "I don't understand you." And the guy said, again, I said, "How are you?" in Shona. "I don't understand you." And the guy says, "Well, let me talk to you in a language that you understand. Turn that damn cigarette off." "What are you talking about?" He said, "This is a gas station. Turn off the damn cigarette." "You're very rude. Get away from me. Get away from me." He says, "Are you done? I have all day, if that's what it takes. Turn off the damn cigarette." She proceeded to yell at him and calling him all kinds of names. And he stood his ground. He said, "I am not leaving until you turn off that cigarette. This is a gas station. You have no business smoking here." You still see it. There are still some who still feel superior to us. Fortunately, it's not many, but there is still a significant number of them who are still that way. I would like to think that we are in a better place as humanity. And the people that you would have thought they knew. I think yesterday I went to speak to a group of the Africa group at the World Bank. And you know, I spoke like I always do. I talked about the Berlin Conference. I talked about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. I talked about the injustices. And they asked all kinds of questions. It was wonderful. And as I was walking out, 2 African-born economists come to me and said, "But Ambassador, we can't keep talking about the Berlin Conference. It's a thing of the past." 2 African economists. I was shocked. I said, "I just finished 2 hours. I answered every question, and you missed everything." I said, "My sons, as long as we have a country called Togo, a country called Eswatini, a country called Malawi, Berlin Conference is alive and well. It's a policy that they spent 3 months strategizing on how to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated." I'm going to repeat that. 4 months of strategizing and making sure that they put together a policy to make sure Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. And that policy is still in place today. That is why we still have a country called Malawi, a country that can never survive on its own. That is why we are unable to see that obvious fact to say we cannot survive as these little-bitty African countries. That is why it is difficult for us to say, why can't we just say Africa for the Africans, no passports? It's a simple decision. The leaders just have to table it in their cabinets, done. Why is it so difficult for us? Famous Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch letters on how to make a slave, how to condition a black person and make sure that they're forever subservient to the white men to perpetuity. We're still suffering from that. The legacy of slavery. Think of the many black people who are just automatically afraid of white people. Our leadership, you sit them in front of a white person, they start shaking. They're afraid to speak up. Why is that? Thanks to Leopold. Thanks to the legacy of slavery. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. How many people realize they're suffering from the legacy of slavery? Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
They're the same ones who came up with the gene segment issue. But what they do is they don't want to bring it all out and make sure it's in our history books. But whose fault is that? We're still using the old colonial textbooks that intentionally eliminated facts that would have brought us up more empowered and proud as Africans. They put in there anything to demoralize us, everything to make us feel everything European is better and everything African was bad. Whose problem is it? We get ministers of education who have the freedom and the liberty to change the colonial textbooks, but they don't. Right here in Ghana, my daughter, I was shocked to realize not a single Kwame Nkrumah book is required reading in Ghana school system. Can you believe that? Not one. So who is stupid? With all the intelligence and all the gene segments, we behave in a very stupid way. What are our ministers of education doing? What stops them from changing the educational curriculum in Africa? Nothing, except they're still suffering from the legacy of colonization. Our ministers of finance, everybody knows it. We are paying for frivolous loans that go back, in some cases, to colonization. And yet they go to the World Bank every year, twice. Why aren't you challenging the World Bank to say, World Bank, we're coming together as African ministers of finance, and we're telling you, here is an open letter. We are no longer going to pay for these loans. These loans have been paid for 1,000 times over. Why are we getting 20% interest rate? We have never defaulted on our loans. Greece defaulted on its loans. Let's look at how much Greece is getting. What interest rate is Greece getting? We have never defaulted on our loans. Many African countries have never defaulted on their loans, and yet the rating agencies give them poor ratings so they can justify charging them high interest rates. It was all by design. When the Bretton Woods institutions were created after the European nations had destroyed themselves, like they always do. They're warriors people. All they know is to fight. After the Second World War, they destroyed themselves. So they looked to developing nations to see to it that their own success is going to be based on the failures of developing nations. They put a system in place to steal and rob in broad daylight the developing nations. The majority are in Africa. Here comes the kicker. You don't see anyone that doesn't look like you and I going to sell bad policies to African nations. They're sending you, my daughter, and my son over here. And they're training you to go and push these bad policies, policies that are detrimental to the development of African nations. They're the ones that are now being used as instruments of our own self-destruction. The damage is deep. When we get to that point, when we understand that we are part of somebody else's experiment that is won over and over and over, they continue to win. When are we going to wake up and say this insanity, like Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? When is the insanity going to end? When are we going to say enough is enough, stupidity no more? It's up to us.
It is.
We have ministers of trade. We know what the World Trade Organization is doing. Switzerland, a country that doesn't have a single acre of cocoa. It is the largest producer of cocoa products. Yeah. Swiss coffee, Swiss chocolate, Swiss. You go to hotels all over Africa. Swiss this, Swiss. It's our chocolate right here from Ghana.
It's true.
Why aren't we challenging them? World Trade Organization is giving it a blind eye. They know it.
Yeah.
Look at the teas and coffees out of East Africa. The best.
The best.
They go to Europe, they're renamed. Are you with me?
Yeah.
We know it's happening. Why aren't they go to WTO and say, enough is enough, stop this BS? You wouldn't want it done to your country. Why are you doing it to us? Simple questions that must be asked and that demand answers. But we don't, because we get scared.
Why are we scared?
No.
Why are we scared, though?
Why are we scared? Why are we scared? What are we afraid of? We are abused. I sat in meetings where they were yelling at ambassadors. And you said to yourself, what gives? What gives you the right? These ministers didn't come thousands of miles to the faraway land to be yelled at, to be demeaned. And we say nothing. When we get to that point, when we are armed with facts and we are empowered and we can stand up and say enough is enough. Now that's when Africa is going to discover her voice. That's when Africa is going to begin to change. And for us to get to that point, we're going to have to keep preaching the gospel of truth and nothing but the truth. The gospel of facts. Truth and facts, two constants that never change. Let's give the world an overdose of our truth. Let's give the world an overdose of our facts. And when we saturate each and every black person, starting with our children, through our educational system, when everybody is full of truth, and we have the courage to say, not today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year, not the next decade, not the next century. The time is up. Game is over. Like we would say in Botswana, ikete, that means time up. And then our own natural resources, look at what Burkina Faso, rather Niger, has done. To say that I'm going to start with my uranium.
Yeah.
And that France, I'm no longer going to sell you my uranium for 80 cents. It's going to be 200 euros per kilo moving forward. Yeah. Right there, Niger kept almost 300 billion a year that was going to France and funding French education, French healthcare. That alone, one mineral, would completely change the economy of Burkina Faso, of Niger overnight. Now let's take all the other minerals. Burkina Faso is doing it. They started with their gold. When are we going to have leadership with enough balls to do what's right? To do what any other man would do? Dude, you wouldn't want me doing that in your country. Why would you want to do it in my country? Get out.